This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. China welcomes two high-profile visitors. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper is in Beijing as London continues its diplomatic reset. And Lao President Thongloun Sisoulith beginning a 5-day state visit. But Beijing trading barbs with Manila, slamming the Philippine defense chief for politicizing issues affecting people's livelihoods after remarks about China being a threat. And Asia's biggest AI expo is in full swing this week in Taipei. We'll tell you about the top industry names taking part in Computex 2026. Meantime, away from East Asia, the fragile Israel-Hezbollah truce is under strain. Tel Aviv says it intercepted 2 projectiles from Lebanon just hours after a U.S. brokered truce was announced. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's administration facing its first political test tomorrow as the country heads to local polls that will decide thousands of government seats across the nation. Britain's top diplomat is in China on a 3-day visit in another sign of improving bilateral ties. A Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, will attend the 11th China-UK Strategic Dialogue. That's a key forum for high-level talks. In Beijing, Ms. Cooper met her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi and Vice President Han Zheng for discussions on global security. Chinese officials say the talks are aimed at strengthening long-term relations.
此次对话期间，双方将围绕落实两国领导人重要共识，拓展务实合作。 以及国际和地区热点问题进行深入交流，共同推动中英长期稳定的全面战略伙伴关系深入发展，让合作成果更好地惠及两国和世界。
Now, Ollie Barrett is covering this story for CNA, and he joins us live from London. Ollie, walk us through what were some of the key outcomes from the British Foreign Secretary's talks with China's top officials?
Well, Telly, it's interesting to hear the remarks from both sides after these discussions have taken place. You mentioned the 11th China-UK Strategic Dialogue, which Yvette Cooper and Chinese officials have been taking part in. And Yvette Cooper has been stressing at and around these meetings that, in her view, there is a lot of potential for the UK and China to continue developing their ties and to cooperate on areas on which they have mutual interests. She named things like trade and investment, artificial intelligence, green technology, addressing climate change as well. Yvette Cooper saying that the rules-based international order, in her view, is in Britain and China's shared interest, she said, to find ways to reduce rising economic tensions. And she said that there were all sorts of challenges going on in the world at the moment that the UK and China could cooperate on, trying to ease as well. The conflict in Ukraine, for example, was an example she gave. But she also talked about, quote, areas of disagreement and said that candour and respect would help mutual understanding. And Han Zheng, for his part, describing what he called a new chapter in bilateral ties, which he says was opened when Keir Starmer made that visit to China in January, that much heralded visit at the time as the UK government tries to really reset ties with Beijing. And Han Zheng calling on both sides to work together in areas around multilateralism, jointly advancing global governance reform, he said, and bringing greater stability and certainty to the world.
So if you've mentioned, Ollie, this is part of UK's efforts to try to reset ties with China. So elaborate more about Ms. Cooper's visit and how it fits into all of that.
Yeah, it's a very difficult diplomatic tightrope for the UK government to walk, Otelli. The Labour government came into power insisting that the previous Conservative administrations that preceded them had really not had a joined-up policy on China, that it was jumping around all over the place, it was inconsistent, and that they were going to address that. And so this is very much part of that ongoing process. I don't think you expect huge leaps forward in any particular areas on this particular visit, but it's really part of attempting to move the broader relationship in what the UK sees as the right direction. All of that, it is, as I say, a diplomatic tightrope to walk. There are those areas of disagreement between the two countries, and some harsh words from the UK's opposition Conservative Party today via Priti Patel, who is the shadow Foreign Secretary. He says that the Foreign Secretary is now in Beijing, Priti Patel says, cozying up to the CCP. She calls it little more than a distraction from domestic controversies that the government is experiencing here at the moment. Priti Patel saying Yvette Cooper should be pushing for the release of Jimmy Lai, but Labour lack the backbone to stand up to China. As I say, the government insists that actually the Conservatives didn't have a sensible policy on China when they were in power, and this is part of proving that you can work with China despite the areas of disagreement that you have. But it is a tricky balance for the UK government to get right, and it's very well aware of that.
Hey, thanks very much for unpacking China-UK relations for us. Ollie Barrett covering the story for CNA live from London. Meantime, China has hit out at Philippines Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro, accusing him of political grandstanding after he described Beijing as a threat. Mr. Teodoro made the comment in an interview with Reuters over the weekend on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore. Now, he said that his country is under severe threat by China, both territorially and politically, and that Manila has no choice but to, quote, stand up against Chinese aggression. Beijing said that the words show Mr. Teodoro is, quote, solely driven by personal interests.
菲方领导人多次表态，愿同中方妥处分歧，推动双边关系缓和。希望菲方言行一致，严格约束官员言行，不要任由个别跳梁小丑一再破坏双方稳定关系的努力。
Ties between both countries have deteriorated sharply in recent years, driven in part by repeated confrontations in the South China Sea. The Philippines has accused China of harassing its vessels, while China says it's enforcing sovereignty in waters it claims as its own. Beijing's also wary of the Philippines' growing defense cooperation with the US and Japan, seeing it as a challenge to its strategic interests. China, meantime, has repeated its objections against an upcoming maritime border delimitation discussion between Japan and the Philippines.
日菲绕开中方，擅自启动所谓海域划界谈判，严重违反包括公约在内的国际法和国际关系基本准则，严重侵害中方海洋权益，中方绝不允许。 海峡两岸同属一个中国，维护国家领土主权和海洋权益是两岸全体中国人的共同责任。
China, in an earlier response to the planned talks, held what it says are law enforcement patrols in waters east of Taiwan, calling it unnecessary action. Beijing views the island as its own territory. Now, the United Nations General Assembly will vote on Wednesday for new non-permanent members to join the Security Council for 2-year terms starting in 2027. Now, the Philippines or Kyrgyzstan are vying to fill the vacant Asia-Pacific seat. And UN analysts believe that a successful Philippine bid could present an opportunity to elevate critical Southeast Asian issues onto the global stage. Mitch McCann reports for CNA from the United Nations in New York.
The Philippine campaign for a seat on the UN Security Council has been a very public one, with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. travelling to New York in March to state his country's case.
The Philippines has regularly proven itself to be an independent, trusted partner, an innovative pathfinder, and a committed peacemaker.
Manila is vying for an Asia-Pacific seat that Daniel Forti from the International Crisis Group says will likely be used to elevate issues important to the ASEAN region, with non-permanent members voting on council resolutions. During the month in which they preside over the council, they will also choose the issues it discusses.
Anytime an elected member comes onto the Security Council, they represent not only their national interests, but also those of their neighborhood and the General Assembly writ large. So you could certainly expect to see a lot more thinking and influence of ASEAN positions in how the Philippines would explain their positions and advocate for certain priorities on the Security Council.
The Philippine campaign has focused on promoting regional security, climate change and upholding international law, rather than the critical foreign policy issue of territorial integrity in the South China Sea. If elected, Daniel Forti says Manila won't want to turn the council into a battleground over a single issue.
Inevitably, the Philippines will have to deal with China as the major player on the Security Council and in their neighborhood. So Manila will have to very carefully balance the positions it takes, not only on its region, but also other issues of world affairs where the U.S. and China are on opposing sides.
Dr. Christopher Ankerson, a clinical professor at New York University who held high-level roles at the UN in Southeast Asia, agrees, saying that the Philippines could elevate issues in the South China Sea at the Council, but it's not where they will be resolved. More likely, Dr. Ankerson says this could be an opportunity for the Philippines to bring international attention back to the situation in Myanmar, a country still facing vast humanitarian challenges after years of instability.
I think we could probably see some broad support for a resolution talking about the need for forward progress, convening some kind of a discussion about the situation in Myanmar. I think that's something that the Philippines could and should bring to the table.
Meanwhile, the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia may not be high on the Philippines' Council priorities, with Daniel Forti saying ASEAN members have shown a tendency to try and resolve issues internally first, rather than in front of the world.
ASEAN states, most recently with Vietnam a few years ago, have attempted to keep discussions about their region off of the Security Council agenda. So we would likely expect the Philippines to continue that approach and try and use quiet diplomacy engagement with Security Council members, and most importantly with regional states, before elevating to the Council itself.
Both Daniel and Christopher say that being elected to the Security Council does come with a dose of reality, and that non-permanent members don't wield veto powers. The Philippines reportedly has the support of the US, UK and France, while other permanent members, Russia and China, will support Kyrgyzstan. President Marcos and the Philippines are hoping that success in Wednesday's vote will be a victory not just for Manila, but for the ASEAN region. For CNA, I'm Mitch McCann at the United Nations in New York.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, the AI boom continuing to push South Korean stocks up and past India's equity market value. Plus, our senior correspondent Victoria Jen brings up the updates from one of the world's biggest tech trade shows.
I'm here at Computex in Taipei. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a future concept. It's becoming part of everyday life. But beyond the buzz, which technologies are likely to have the biggest impact? And what does it all mean for Taiwan's role in the global AI race? I speak to an industry watcher to understand the key trends emerging from this year's show.
Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. You are just in time for business news with Roland Lim. So, Roland, we are talking about Computex in Taipei. And apparently, NVIDIA has just reinforced Taiwan's central role in the AI supply chain. Sounds interesting there. So, tell us more.
Right, that's right. The AI boom is still supply constrained, and that makes Taiwan even more important to global markets. NVIDIA, for example, relying on Taiwan to supply them with new chips developed. Taiwan's leadership is working at securing and ensuring supplies for the AI boom that stays stable. President William Lai said maintaining the status quo on cross-strait relations is the responsible thing to do for global supply chains. Mr. Lai was speaking at the opening ceremony of this year's Computex in Taipei, drawing more than 6,000 exhibitors from around the world, including big names from tech, among them NVIDIA's chief, that's Jensen Huang, highlighting the island's relationship with the U.S. and also looking to put to rest chip scarcity fears amid the AI boom.
Taiwan is such an incredible strategic partner for the United States because Taiwan is investing in the ecosystem, the manufacturing in the United States. If you look at TSMC and Amkor and Spill and Wistron and Foxconn, the amount of investment they've put into the United States so that the global supply chain could be as diversified and resilient, redundant as possible is incredible. We have enough supply for very robust growth. However, we are supply constrained. And so that's the reason why everybody's talking about scarcity of this, scarcity of that. We've worked very hard to align with our partners and plan with our partners. And you know that our partners are very supportive of NVIDIA.
Yesterday at Computex, NVIDIA announced its entry into the consumer PC market. CEO Jensen Huang unveiled the RTX Spark. That's a chip that could revolutionize laptops. From next-generation chips and AI PCs to robots and smart factories, companies are showcasing the technologies they believe will shape the future. Well, CNA's Victoria Jen has been following the big announcement at Computex. She speaks with another industry watcher, Sherry Wang, to break down the highlights and trends that could have the biggest impact on businesses and consumers alike.
Sherry, can you take us through some of the highlights of this year's Computex?
Sure. I will start with robotics. So for the first time, Computex has a robotic zone. Last year, the focus was on AI server and AI supply chain. And now it's moving into robotics and connectivity. And so the companies are not just talking about chips, they are talking about cooling, networking, and I think Marvell is a good example. You saw their CEO, Matt Murphy, was on keynote stage with Jensen Huang, and the companies usually keep the low profile. So that tells you the connectivity has become really important. And so Taiwan play a big part of this. And you saw Jensen Huang, Lisa Su, and Li Butang all are in Taipei around Computex. Their company compete with each other, but reality is they all need Taiwan supply chain.
Are there any new products or innovations that have really caught your attention?
Yeah, NVIDIA on Monday just released a new AI PC platform developed with MediaTek. It's called RTX Spark. The goal is to bring AI directly onto the personal computer. The second area is robotics. So there's a Taiwanese company called AD-Link. They have a robot called Mobi. It is a general purpose robot that powered with the company's Edge AI platform.
And how is NVIDIA's new product going to impact the AI industry?
Yeah, so NVIDIA wants to bring AI directly onto personal computer. And so Jensen Huang said PC is being redefined. So for 40 years, the users are using PC by clicking button, opening apps, and typing command. And you don't have to go through all those steps anymore. And now you have AI agent. They will do they know your task. They will complete for you. So NVIDIA is moving beyond data center into PC, and that is a space long dominated by Intel and AMD. And Qualcomm recently has been pushing into AI PC also. So I would say it is not just a new chip. It is NVIDIA's attempt to challenge traditional PC leaders.
We know that Taiwan is at the center of the global supply chain. As the geopolitical tensions rise, how do you see Taiwan faring in this AI race?
I think Taiwan is in a very strong position, but also very sensitive one. Taiwan produces more than 90% of the most advanced chip in the world. Taiwan's role is not just about chip, it is a key partner in AI infrastructure. So that's why you see the CEO, such as Jensen Huang, Lisa Su, and Li Butang are here, because the AI industry still depends heavily on Taiwan's supply chain. AMD is a good example. The company just announced US $10 billion investment on Taiwan's ecosystem. And Jensen Huang has called Taiwan the epicenter of AI revolution. So, but geopolitical pressure is rising. We see U.S. wants more production at home. China is building its own AI ecosystem. So that also matters for Singapore, because Singapore is becoming more important in AI deployment and cloud services. So, so I think Asia's AI ecosystem is being diversified, but Taiwan still remains the center of the AI supply chain. I think that is unlikely to change anytime soon.
Now, South Korea's equity market has overtaken India's as the world's sixth biggest, driven by an unyielding surge in chip heavyweights powering the global AI build-out. Total market capitalization of South Korea's listed companies has soared 86% to $5 trillion this year, while India's has declined to $4.8 trillion. Now, India has been dragged lower by a weakening rupee and record foreign outflows. But its more than $4 trillion economy is still among the fastest growing in the world, outpacing South Korea's, whose GDP comes in slightly below at $2 trillion. Samsung and SK Hynix, as newly minted members of the $1 trillion valuation club, have powered South Korea's equity surge, lifting the Kospi in 2026 gains to more than 100% through their dominance in AI memory chips. At the same time, South Korea's inflation rate accelerated to a more than two-year high in May, raising expectations of an interest rate hike as early as next month. The consumer price index rose 3.1% from a year ago, beating market forecasts and marking the fastest pace of inflation since March of 2024. Higher fuel costs were a key driver, with petroleum prices surging more than 24% amid tensions in the Middle East. International airfares also jumped by over 33%. The Bank of Korea says inflation is likely to remain around the 3% level for now, as higher oil prices spread across the economy. Economists say the outlook will largely depend on developments in the conflict involving Iran and the wider Middle East. Department stores in Japan have reported a surge in duty-free sales last month, a persistently weaker yen helping drive the increase, encouraging visitors to spend more. The strong growth partly made up for the decline in tourists from China. Now, duty-free sales in Takashimaya for the month of May jumped 20% on year. Kansai-focused H2O retailing also saw retail spending increase 20% as well. And that's despite purchases from Chinese visitors falling 40%. Japanese department stores are rebounding from a shaky start to the year as lingering political tensions kept many visitors from China away. But the increase in the numbers of travelers from Taiwan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia are helping to fill the gap. Staying in Japan, Japan is pondering a temporary cut to its food sales tax in a move aimed at easing pressure on households facing higher living costs. According to the Mainichi Shimbun, the government is mulling a 2-year reduction for the tax on food sales from April next year. The proposal would lower the current 8% tax rate to 1% until 2028. However, economists say the key challenge remains how to pay for the tax cut. Analysts estimate reducing the food tax to 1% could cost the government around $25 billion or 4 trillion yen a year. Concerns over the funding have already unsettled bond markets, with investors wary of additional debt issuance. The government is expected to announce the findings of discussions on the proposal later this month. And that is the latest in business. Utali.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Right, we are going to go for another break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Lao looking to strengthen ties with Beijing as President Thongloun Sisoulith arrives in China for a 5-day state visit. Our correspondent breaks down what it means for bilateral ties. And talks between Israel and Lebanon scheduled later today in Washington, even as hostilities between the warring parties continue. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China welcomes 2 high-profile visitors. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper is in Beijing as London continues its diplomatic reset. And Lao President Thongloun Sisoulith beginning a 5-day state visit at the invitation of counterpart Xi Jinping. But Beijing trading barbs with Manila, slamming the Philippine defense chief for politicizing issues affecting people's livelihoods after remarks about China being a threat. And Asia's biggest AI expo in full swing in Taipei. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang talking up Taiwan's strong relationship with the US in the high-tech supply chain. Lao President Thongloun Sisoulith has arrived in the Chinese city of Hangzhou for a 5-day state visit at the invitation of President Xi Jinping. According to Lao state media, the trip aims to strengthen long-standing ties between the two countries and deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership. It is also expected to promote closer bilateral relations and enhance cooperation across various areas. Earlier this year, the two countries marked 65 years of diplomatic relations. China remains Laos' largest foreign investor, with cooperation spanning major infrastructure projects, including the China-Lao Railway, which was inaugurated back in 2021. For more insights, we are joined by CNA's correspondent Deborah Wong, and she is speaking to us live from Shenzhen. Deborah, first up, walk us through the significance of the Lao president's visit to China.
So China and Lao are marking 65 years of diplomatic relations this year. And, both countries have pledged to hold a series of celebrations to foster deeper exchanges. But beyond this diplomatic initiative, both countries are also using these kind of meetings as a platform to realign on development strategies, because especially since President Thongloun's re-election in March, and Laos is also actually marking its 10th year of its 5-year plan, whereas China at the start of this year launched its 15th 5-year plan. So President Xi Jinping earlier said that both countries should use this opportunity, to actually draw a new blueprint for high-level cooperation, given that both countries are at a critical stage of development right now. The relationship has certainly deepened over the past year. Lao actually was elevated to dialogue partner under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization when China hosted the forum in Tianjin in 2025. And at that time, analysts did say that Lao, that pivot actually gave the country a bigger geopolitical platform within Beijing's sphere of influence.
So, Deborah, what areas of cooperation then can we expect between both countries?
We do know that China is Laos' biggest foreign investor, and there are many infrastructure projects that China has in Laos. For instance, the China-Lao Railway. Today, that pivot to digital technology as well as green financing seems to be an area of priority, and we can really see it in the places that President Thongloun Sisoulith has chosen to visit. His first stop being Hangzhou. Now, Hangzhou is home to many major R&D centers, major Chinese tech companies, for instance, Alibaba, Unitree, as well as DeepSeek. The president has visited several Chinese tech companies already as of today, as the country accelerates its own digital economy. In fact, Laos is part of China's Digital Silk Road initiative, where both countries are collaborating on a series of policies, for instance, broadband expansion, as well as payment systems. He will also be visiting Huzhou. Now, Huzhou is known to be one of China's pioneering areas for green financing, as well as green manufacturing hub. And, he's going to be having discussions about China's experience in ecological governance. Now, both countries have already launched a cross-border power grid back in April, and that's going to be supporting Laos' transition to greener energy. So that's going to be timely as well, because Laos is trying to position itself, strengthening itself as a reputation for a renewable energy hub in Southeast Asia. It already has plans for wind and solar projects underway. So we will be keeping an eye out for any of these kind of deals in the bilateral meetings ahead. Oteli.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for helping us unpack China-Lao ties. CNA's Deborah Wong reporting to us live from Shenzhen. Now, China and Brazil have pledged to jointly resist external challenges as their foreign ministers meet for a high-level strategic dialogue in Beijing. Both sides vow to deepen ties, safeguard world peace and stability, as well as defend the rights and interests of developing countries. Now, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Brazilian counterpart agreed to expand cooperation in areas including trade and technology, as Brazil faces mounting pressure from the U.S. to curb its ties with China. Mr. Wang expressed China's support for Brazil's sovereignty and its right to pursue an independent path toward development. However, he did not directly address the U.S. designation. The Brazilian foreign minister's visit comes as the South American country grapples with a fertilizer crunch linked to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz due to the Middle East conflict. Well, the country is also facing a proposed 25% U.S. tariff over what Washington describes as unreasonable trade practices. Now, China and Brazil are key members of BRICS, with Beijing remaining Brazilia's largest trading partner. Now, Taiwan's main opposition leader is in the U.S. for a 15-day mission. Kuomintang chair Cheng Li-wun aims to strengthen her party's standing with the U.S. policymakers and help prevent what she calls an avoidable war across the Taiwan Strait. Ms. Cheng was greeted by supporters in San Francisco, where she is expected to visit Taiwanese American communities. Well, she'll be making stops in Boston and New York before heading to Washington, D.C. For meetings with political figures. Ms. Cheng said in a pre-trip briefing that she would be very willing to meet with President Donald Trump while she's in America, adding that she was pleased to see U.S.-China ties moving in a better direction after the leaders met in Beijing last month. Now, the U.S. and South Korea launched new high-profile talks to implement a series of security agreements. High on the agenda is Seoul's push to develop nuclear-powered submarines to guard against Pyongyang's missile and nuclear threats. South Korea also wants to secure the right to enrich uranium and reprocess spent nuclear fuel for peaceful purposes. Now, these are currently restricted under the existing nuclear agreement with the U.S. Discussions on other security issues are set to continue tomorrow, including the expansion of shipbuilding cooperation between Washington and Seoul. Today's talks stem from commitments made during an October summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Lee Jae-myung. These include South Korea's pledge to invest $350 billion in the U.S. in exchange for lower tariffs. Well, time now for another short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, at least 9 people injured after a powerful tropical storm lashed southern Japan, bringing torrential rain and strong winds. A fragile, months-long ceasefire hanging in the balance as Israel and militant group Hezbollah renew hostilities. Now, Israel's military says that its air defenses intercepted 2 projectiles from Lebanon just hours after the U.S. announced that both sides agreed to halt fighting ahead of talks today. Now, the IDF says a, quote, suspicious aerial target fell in Israeli territory near the Lebanese border, adding that no injuries were reported. Well, concerns over the situation in Lebanon mounting as Israel orders residents in Nabatea city to evacuate. The city is near a castle that Israel had captured previously. Israeli drone strikes on a village in the south of Lebanon yesterday killed 8 people. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump earlier announced that he had persuaded both sides to de-escalate following separate calls with officials from Israel and Hezbollah. Well, the situation in Lebanon weighing heavily on diplomatic efforts toward peace in the region as Iran reiterates that Lebanon must be included in a ceasefire agreement between Tehran and Washington. Reports suggest that Iran has threatened to break off talks with the U.S., while a senior Iranian official has reportedly said that renewed war with the U.S. is, quote, inevitable. Now we've got Blake Sifton. He's been tracking developments for CNN, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Blake, we've been talking about reports of Israel and Hezbollah exchanging fire after the U.S. announced that both sides agreed to halt fighting. I mean, just how fragile is this ceasefire effort?
Good evening, Otelli. Well, just like the last U.S. brokered ceasefire in Lebanon that essentially collapsed and this new one is meant to replace, it also appears very, very fragile. As you say, we've seen continued Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon today. At least 4 people have been killed in Israeli drone strikes on several vehicles. As well, that evacuation order for the city of Nabatea is very significant. It is a strategic city home to some 40,000 people. So to have a mass evacuation order like that just a day, really less than a day after a new ceasefire is meant to come into effect, will certainly be troubling for their part. Hezbollah has also fired several rockets and at least 1 drone into northern Israel. Now, I believe the main issue here is that the terms of the ceasefire remain unclear. When President Trump announced it, he did not clarify exactly what it entailed, and each side has interpreted it differently and essentially described it differently. Hezbollah says that it's meant to apply to all Israeli military action across Lebanon, which would mean they wouldn't be able to strike in the south. Israel has said that Hezbollah needs to stop their fire entirely, but that Israel will not strike in Beirut, but that they are allowed to continue operating in southern Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put out a statement today, even threatening to strike Beirut if Hezbollah once again targets Israel. And he said that Israeli forces will continue to operate in southern Lebanon. Now, Israel is understood to be very unhappy with this ceasefire and only to have agreed to it reluctantly. We understand that there was a phone call yesterday between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. According to reports, that was quite an angry phone call with President Trump exasperated and upset with the Israeli Prime Minister for escalating the conflict in Lebanon as they were trying to negotiate a wider deal with Iran. Officials quoted in reports about that call said that President Trump essentially steamrolled the Israeli Prime Minister and forced him to end Israel's attacks in Beirut. Only yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as Defense Minister Katz, had announced that the Israeli military would begin striking Beirut, something the United States has long pushed them not to do.
So all these hostilities, putting a strain on this already tense peace process between the U.S. and Iran. Blake, what is the current state of these talks that's supposed to end the conflict?
Well, President Trump continues to express confidence that a deal will come. He spoke to U.S. media yesterday, and he said that he expects a deal over the next week. He said that he is still reviewing this draft agreement and that there are still a few points to work through. Now, describing the very serious escalation of violence in Lebanon, he described that as a little glitch, but said that he turned it around. Of course, as you say, that violence in Lebanon threatened to upend the entire peace process between Iran and the United States after Netanyahu and Katz they actually said they were going to promise, really, to attack Beirut. The Iranian government said that a ceasefire in Lebanon is key to any ceasefire between Iran and the United States. And as you say, they threatened to walk away from those talks entirely. Now, today, there is a report in a media outlet in Iran linked to the government. They say that Iranian authorities are studying the U.S.'s latest proposal in this draft agreement, and they have not yet sent back their response to it. We've also heard from a senior officer in Iran's Central Military Command, and he said that it was inevitable that the war between Iran and the United States would restart because the United States demands our total surrender. In recent days, there have been reports as well that the main issue that still remains in these talks, in these negotiations, is the $24 billion in Iranian assets that the U.S. has frozen. Iran reportedly wants at least half of that money, some $12 billion, unfrozen and released before they agree to this initial agreement with the United States.
Hey, many thanks for that coverage. Blake Sifton covering the story for CNA live from Tel Aviv. At least 9 people have been injured after a severe tropical storm battered southwestern Japan. A tropical storm Jangmi was downgraded from a typhoon but continues to lash the region with strong winds and heavy rain, packing winds in excess of 120 kilometers per hour. Authorities warning of tidal surges and landslides. Jangmi is cutting a northeasterly path and will skirt the eastern coast of Kyushu Island. The entire population of Kyushu's Miyazaki City, around 390,000 people, have been urged to evacuate their homes. Now, weather officials say Jangmi could drench the southern islands with up to 300 millimeters of rain by this evening. Power to tens of thousands of homes has been knocked out, while several houses and structures were damaged. Authorities have urged residents in harm's way to seek shelter from the storm. Travel disruptions are also expected. Japan's 2 biggest airlines, ANA and Japan Airlines, have cancelled at least 600 flights scheduled from Monday through Wednesday. Singapore Airlines has rescheduled at least 14 flights meant for today and tomorrow. Meanwhile, local bus and regional train services have also been suspended. Ships in nearby waters have been warned of hazardous seas with an extended period of rain forecast. Jangmi will head out to sea in the coming days, but not before drenching Tokyo. Weather officials say the path of the storm could see it circling back and impacting the northern Philippines. Well, the tropical storm comes amid warnings of a potential super strong El Nino, the likes of which meteorologists say has not been seen in 150 years. Well, the World Meteorological Organization says that there is an 80% chance of the weather phenomenon development from now till August. El Nino is part of a Pacific climate cycle, and it disrupts rainfall patterns, bringing floods to some regions, while triggering droughts and heat waves across much of Asia and Australia. Now, El Nino is driven by unusually warm sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean. It recurs every 2 to 7 years, hitting crop production, driving prices, and disrupting energy markets and economies. Weather officials say the effects of this El Nino could be most intense in Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The warning comes as countries grapple with energy and fertilizer crises linked to the war on Iran. And more on El Nino can be found on our website and mobile app, including this explainer on what the phenomenon will mean for Singapore. Now, at least 4 people in northeast Japan have been wounded after they were attacked by a bear. All victims sustained non-life-threatening injuries and were conscious when sent to the hospital. Security camera footage showed a black bear near the entrance of Fukushima Steelworks factory complex, where it attacked 2 employees. It later escaped into a neighboring residential area, where it injured 2 more people. Now, the bear is believed to be in the area. 2 nearby schools have also been shut for safety reasons. Well, the incident has reignited nationwide fears over bear attacks, which hit a record high of nearly 240 incidents last year, resulting in more than a dozen deaths. Japan has stepped up its public awareness campaigns, and the country plans to triple the number of municipal bear control staff within 5 years. 2 pilots in Taiwan have died in a military plane crash. The Air Force said that it happened during a training mission at Gangshan Base in Kaohsiung. Local TVBS network showed what it said was the crash site, wreckage lying on grass next to the runway. The Air Force said that the pilots were on a simulated engine failure route. It has formed a special task force to investigate the cause of the crash. Now, the ill-fated plane was the Beechcraft T-34 model. The Air Force website described it as a primary flight trainer used for more than 40 years. South Korean authorities have launched a joint inspection at the defense manufacturing facility where a deadly explosion took place yesterday that killed 5 people. 2 others are injured. Police, fire officials, and forensic experts are investigating the cause of the explosion at a Hanwha aerospace facility in the city of Daejeon, some 150 kilometers from Seoul. The inspection aims to determine where the ignition began and whether flammable materials were present at the scene. Now, Hanwha Aerospace says that workers were cleaning propellant powder residue from tools used to produce propulsion systems when the blast happened. It said all 5 people killed were its employees, including 2 temporary workers in their 20s. The company has partially suspended operations at its Daejeon facility following the deadly explosion. South Koreans are heading to the polls tomorrow in local elections that are widely seen as the first political test for President Lee Jae-myung's administration. Now, Mr. Lee took office a year ago, promising economic reform and a revival of South Korea's financial markets. Well, CNA's senior correspondent Lim Min-suk has this report.
The June 3rd elections will decide thousands of local government seats across the country, including the closely watched race for Seoul mayor. Both the ruling and opposition camps have framed the vote as a referendum on the direction of President Lee Jae-myung's administration as it marks its first year in office. The ruling Democratic Party says it needs stronger support to push ahead with reforms, including measures to address the Korea discount, referring to the chronic undervaluation of Korean stocks. The conservative People Power Party says the vote is a chance to check what it calls growing political dominance by President Lee and his allies. Before taking office, President Lee argued that weaknesses in South Korea's stock market had pushed investment towards real estate speculation.
저는 우리 국민들께서 이 자산시장 중에서도 금융시장에서 또 자본시장에서 좀 혜택을 누리면 좋겠어요. 이 대한민국 주가지수가 지금 오늘 얼마 가나 모르겠는데 한 2,500 왔다 갔다 하고 있죠. 이게 한 5천 정도, 4천 정도 넘어간다면 우리나라 대한민국의 국부가 늘어나지 않습니까?
1 year later, the Kospi has surpassed 8,000, roughly tripling from the levels Mr. Yi cited when he took office.
주식 장 좋죠. 네, 좀 저도 수혜를 받고 저희 가족들이나 주변 친구들도 다 재미를 좀 보고 있어가지고. 근데 전반적으로 한국 경제 시장이 좋냐라고 물어보면은 사실 물가도 많이 높아지고 뭐 고용 지수나 뭐 그런 것도 좀 저조하게 나타나다 보니까 그런 거는 확답을 못 드리겠네요.
While investors have welcomed the rally, many voters say they have yet to feel the benefits. The administration rolled out debt relief for millions of small borrowers, but rising costs of living continue to be a grievance.
주식이 오르면 뭘 합니까? 부동산도 올랐고 물가도 올랐고 그럼 돈이 번 게 아니에요. 그대로인 겁니다. 돈을 버는 속도보다 물가가 올라가는 속도가 너무 빠르기 때문에 좀 그렇고.
Conservative commentator Cho Gap-che says controversy over judicial reforms and moves to cancel ongoing prosecutions have mobilized voters who might otherwise have stayed at home.
그동안에 이 법률 문제에 대해서는 일반 사람들이 좀 이해하기 어려운 점도 있어가지고 이게 보수 성향 사람들한테 처음으로 야 이건 해도 너무한다. 이건 완전히 독재로 가는 것 아니냐 하는 실감을 줌으로써 이 합리적 보수 사람들도 이제는 안 되겠다. 투표장에 나가야 되겠다.
Recent polls show the gap between the ruling and opposition camps narrowing, with Seoul emerging as a key battleground. For President Yi, a strong result would signal that market optimism is translating into broader public support. But a setback would suggest many voters feel those gains have yet to reach them. Im Yan-suk, CNA, Seoul.
A day of fun and festivities in a North Korean capital yesterday as the country marked International Children's Day. Well, state media KCNA says that local and foreign children came together for traditional games, music, performances, and cultural activities. Now, pictures released by KCNA show children taking part in traditional games, including rope skipping, tug-of-war, and circle dancing. Celebrations also featured musical performances, with children singing songs and playing traditional Korean instruments, such as the geagung. Now, the colorful celebrations drew a whole range of guests, including senior ruling party officials, foreign diplomats, overseas Koreans, and a delegation of Korean school children from Japan. Well, Children's Day is observed on different dates around the world. North Korea is among the countries that observe the occasion on 1st of June, alongside China. And that wraps up Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.